The other important thing I think is to change the way we think about publishers.
And it's this interesting dynamic of when you're marketing your game, do you almost try to you guys have been doing games for like a decade plus right now, and sustainability is a big part of that. And I think a lot of developers struggle with that when they release their first title. They get to that milestone, and then they kind of don't know what the next steps are. They don't know how to maintain financial stability from a development standpoint, a sense of consistency. So for you guys, as a team that has done it and has done it successfully over a long period of time, what advice would you give developers who get past that first game and want to build an actual studio and a career out of this?
We waited so many years to actually ship and make one of our own games. We designed a business plan, which of course has changed and iterated and mutated several times. But when we started, it just made sense. It made sense for our team size, and our focus, as you said, was sustainability, like achieving a situation in which we could live off making games. I teach game development and game industry stuff from local universities, and I always tell students that we go into game development because there's a big drive and passion to make games. We have big dreams. We love this. We love games. We have grown with them. But if we really want to make this a way of living, we have to take this very seriously, because when you go out there, it's wild. This is one of those industries that are beautiful. Beautiful people working here is beautiful. It's there's a lot of cooperation, and people's really open and friendly, but at the same time, business wise, it's really tough to make ends meet. It's really hard. So what I say to students and young developers, like, keep your ideas, don't throw them out until you have enough experience, until you have built a team that allows you to make your idea, until you have learned how the game industry really works, who is who, and just make something that gives you money at first. But if you want to build a studio, if you want to build or make a career out of game development, don't make that game the only option for survival. It's like the only way to be better is to stay alive. And if you die, it's game over. The other important thing, I think, is to change the way we think about publishers. I would say that they're providing a service for you. You are their client. You're actually paying on revenue share. And their service has to be good. So if they are not providing a service, you shouldn't be working with them. So if they are not providing you with marketing, if they do not commit in the contract to a certain amount of investment that is actually something that you could check and audit, don't go that way.
When I talk to developers who make RPGs, and this obviously isn't just an RPG, it's a JRPG, but when I talk to developers who make those games, I always ask them, a lot of times players will just default compare RPGs to AAA RPGs. And obviously that's not fair. Is that something you worry about with Sky Ocean?
I would say that there are some areas in which you can make that clear so that the expectations are in line with what you're going to deliver. But at the same time, it's difficult because what you're looking to get as much exposure as you can. If you're working with a publisher, you will need to really discuss about this topic, because how they will present the game is really important to how it's going to be perceived after it's released.
You raise an interesting point about expectations. And I think Starfield ran into that problem recently. Obviously, they're AAA, it's a different animal. But I think the marketing team behind Starfield really put everything they had into that game. And they really hyped that title up. And I think they almost put the expectations on an unreachable level. And when it released, it's kind of suffered the consequences for that. And I think people weren't as happy as they could have been with that title because of the expectations, because of what the team behind the game was saying, because of what Xbox was saying. And it's this interesting dynamic of when you're marketing your game, do you almost try to undersell some of the different dynamics and mechanics and world exploration features so that you can overachieve as opposed to underachieve?
Yeah, no, in our case, we're very conscious about what we communicate. We iterated a lot on the Steam description, the usual bullet points, features, so that they are as true as possible, so that they do not leave too much to imagination. Of course, you also want to sound exciting, but I would say that there's a sweet spot that you have to find between being realistic and being exciting, sounding exciting.
But with your game, right? Talk to me about, I mean, this game, it has a lot of different elements to it. It's an RPG, so I would imagine there's world exploration. It has flying. It has turn-based combat within that flying. And then outside of that, just you're having a story on top of that. So how do you bring all of those things together in this title?
I would say that the most important thing for us was to focus on the design pillars that we defined at first. We're trying to have an infrastructure, a software architecture that allows us to show different stuff in different ways, but coming from a common basis.
I see.
In a cost-effective way. The whole exploration and the whole idea of being an air pirate, and if you think about games like Skies of Arcadia, they did this 20 years ago. We need an overworld. We need town explorations.
Yeah.
We need dungeon explorations and turn-based battles. That was the core of the game. But one of the design pillars was also about taking care of managing your crew. And I would say that was the main selling point that made us stand out from a regular JRPG.
Was that the first thing you worked on? I would have to think you would build the mechanics out first, the flying mechanic being the chief one within this game. What was kind of step one while you were creating all of these different elements and then bringing them together?
I would say when we think about Sky Oceans as we know it now, we started building that from the combat outside. I mean, combat, turn-based combat had to work, because otherwise it's like, let's just go and make an adventure game. Because the rest was, I wouldn't say easy, but less complicated. But to answer your question, systems first.
What about the world design, right? I would imagine it's a tricky thing to tackle in a game like this, because I think a lot of times flying games, they run into the issue where there is almost unlimited freedom when you're flying, but then the problem is it feels empty, it feels a little bit slower paced. Because of that, I think Squadrons ran into that problem when they released their game. How do you tackle that from a world design perspective?
The fact of it being a, let's say, post-cataclysm kind of world in which the earth just shattered and people started to live isolated from each other and forming tribes. And it was a decision that was just because it sounded cool. It just sounds like very Ghibli-esque. But also because we didn't have the manpower to populate such a big world and make these huge maps. You could say it's a trope of a flying island. And what we did was creating these smaller, constricted environments in which we could focus most of the art effort to make it look as beautiful as possible, still wild, and created some rules in this game in which the winds were so strong outside these natural barriers that you have in the island, that these little airplanes, they just couldn't go outside because they would be, taken by the winds and crash. And the only way to go between islands is on a carrier ship.
How big is the world in this game?
The world is divided into different regions. We have several regions.
I got you.
I won't say a number because and we have several levels of layers in terms of height
within those regions. I see.
Yeah. So we are gating the access to all these regions and heights with some plot devices and actual upgrades for your ship. So at first you're navigating a kind of like a limited region with just a handful of islands and missions to take. And then the world starts to slowly open up.
Give me the elevator pitch for Sky Ocean, right? Talk to me about just the basic story behind it, what players can expect as they go into this game. Just talk to me about that for a second.
Sky Oceans is, as I mentioned, it's a JRPG inspired by the classics like Skies of Arcadia, Chrono Trigger. It's a JRPG with a heart. It's all about managing your own band of air pirates in a world that is both beautiful but also wild and dangerous, inspired by Ghibli aesthetics and populated by different tribes and cultures. You will be able to command your own airship and to bring more people, more pilots into your crew. You're recruiting people along the way. You're making friends. You're making enemies. You're fighting pirates. You're fighting the Alliance. But you're also making friends, helping people, helping towns in need, and getting stronger in order to retake your hometown, which was taken by the Alliance.
Right, we're looking into next year. What does 2024 look like for you guys from a roadmap perspective, right?
It's going to be basically taking care of the game, getting it ready for launch. We don't have a confirmed launch date yet, but you should expect some news later this year. Maybe we can share something. As a studio, hopefully we will be working on our next game. We can't say much about it yet, but it's going to be exciting. I will take the chance to ask people to follow us and make sure that you keep up with all the news.